What's happening, folks? Welcome to this episode of On the Board, where we take a look at things in progress or in the works or things that were rushed through before the process was even recorded. What you're looking at here is an oil on canvas from 2005, back in the archives. I never did get a protection coat placed on this one because I was never quite satisfied with it being done. But in a way, now that I look at it, it actually is. It was the first oil painting of 2005. I remember this distinctly, where I was and the collection of paintings that would follow after that. It's called Kniska at Leisure. Some of you, ancient historians might recognize the name Kniska, the acrobatic, athletic, Spartan, talk of the town, basically. She became famous for her acrobatics and stuff, sort of like a superstar of sorts, physical superstar. The reason I pulled this one out is I realize that with some poor handling by yours truly, I caused this one a lot of damage around the corners here. If you can see, it's scuffed down to the white of the canvas. The blue's been scuffed away. Down here in the corner as well. And along the edges, that's usually where it gets it. Actually, for the longest time, I kept this one as well as a few others in bubble wrap, so they were protected that way. So what I'll be doing is going ahead and patching that up, and then get my clear coat put on there and protect it, and then maybe put it up for sale. I don't know. We'll see. Remember this one well, and in many ways, I was really pleased with it. And in some ways, I knew there was more work to be done. Okay, right away, someone can see that a certain amount of, if someone's to see this painting, they would see that there was a certain, there's a certain amount of knowledge concerned with anatomy when looking at this particular work. Actually, in prior videos, if you remember, I talked about this period of time. I think it was around 2006-ish, where a few things were happening with a painter friend of mine. Went to one of his shows. Actually, I got one of his paintings from that show. I'd like to show it, but I think I would have to discuss that with him first. And actually, I wouldn't know how to get a hold of him. I don't even know if he's still alive, and I'm not gonna. Yeah, certainly. I got that and a few of his drawings. I encouraged him a lot, and at the time, I would buy his works to keep him, confident. I believed he had a fine hand, but he believed that I had some traits that he felt he could use, and in a way, I had to agree when it came to anatomy and drawing figures and faces and that sort of thing. And it was through his particular circle and one of the curators that was running one of the galleries there downtown that suggested, because I don't know, I guess he. Actually, I don't want to get into the money aspect, but he felt like he should be doing me a favor, right? And I wasn't sure about the whole gallery scene, but it was an experience of sorts that I didn't fully indulge in, I'll put it that way. But to be clear, it was at this point that his curator and himself came up with the idea of having me teach a class in anatomy to the art students that were there. I wouldn't, I guess you'd call them students. They were enthusiasts. They just, there were people trying to learn how to paint and draw, and that was that, and it was a certain circle. I turned it down, and I certainly didn't have any problems with going up in front of the class, and in fact, I had met a lot of those people at the showing right? At his the one show there. I met most of those people. Got on with some of them, didn't get on with some of them. Some of them were just fucking plain creepy. But whatever. Thing was, I declined because the way I saw it, I myself didn't feel I was my knowledge of anatomy was adequate because I was still struggling with certain things. I was still learning. I mean, I'm still learning. You're always learning, but I turned it down. But what I didn't realize, and in retrospect, when I think about it, is that a lot of the people that were asking about that simply saw that I could do it better than they could, so therefore, would you teach the class kind of thing. So, but either way, it didn't happen. But anyway, I continued to paint up the series because we were offered a dual show at the time after that show at a different gallery, actually down. What was that? Yeah, that was later. I think as late as 2007. Don't quote me on that. That period of time, although intense, putting it into chronological order is sometimes tough. But anyway, there it was. And I pulled this one up because I realized it's long overdue for the patchwork to fix up those blemishes, those scratches and stuff. Anyway, as I was saying, there it was. Now, folks, the ocean and the lighting, all of that's personal work. Now, I don't know if you remember this, but with some of the acrylic work, I mentioned something about, how when people are taught to paint, they encourage you never to use the blacks in your color work. Like if you're coming up with a pigment, never use the blacks, never use the blacks. Well, fuck them. Like, they start telling you. Anyway, when it came to paints, I was doing that sort of thing way back then too. I recognized that within this starry sky sort of background, I wanted it dark, but I didn't want it black. I want it with deeper hues. Those clear starry nights when you go out and there's not too much city light, and how clear it is, and it looks deep, and it just goes on and on and on, right? Almost like fluid and oil. Like you know what I'm talking about if you've ever seen that sort of thing. So here ended up going with a navy blue, but bringing it down with the black, darkening, bringing it down and leaving also on the palette when I was mixing some light blotches so I could spread that in. The anatomy is self-explained because this, in fact, was a referenced picture, right? If you understand what I mean. Here's my reference here, right? Now, this particular photo came into my possession through I think it was a Flex publication around 93, 94, and there was a series of was the photographer Bill Dobbins or something? I can't remember the name of the photographer, but he did a series on all this subject matter, all anatomical, well, not anatomical, they were bodybuilders, right? But viewing them through an artistic lens, like setting up different kinds of settings, backgrounds and stuff. In this one, they used the idea of loose drapery. The patterns I put in the drapery around the edge, the Greek patterns, that was because had more to do with the subject matter I was trying to create rather than do here. Now, I remember at the time, and as well, when I looked at this photo, my memory came back. I remember thinking, oh, I think this model is Debbie Mugley, one of the famous bodybuilders at the time who was on the stage going for, you know, taking her Olympic shots and stuff like that. But it is not. I remember coming to that conclusion that it was not. It was a different builder together. But the hair is what convinced me that it might have been Deborah Muggley. But in fact, it wasn't. But that's really irrelevant. That really doesn't matter. But then again, speaking of the hair, I remember putting in those dirty blondes behind the highlighted locks, right? And thinking, wow, once it really started to take form, I could see it was like you could almost, like I look at it, right? You can almost, it feels like you could sink your fingers right in there. It looks pretty realistic. And in fact, this particular painting was, I would say, right off the top of my head, I would say it was the third painting I had ever done. It had always been drawing with me. Pen and ink, drawing, pen and ink, drawing, comic book stuff, and a little bit of watercolors in school and shit, but nothing to, write home about or whatever. But yeah, it was, and the last time this was, as I said, 2005. It was coming to the end of 2005, around November, if I remember correctly. The first one and the last one of 2005. I had started others in 2005, roughed out the layouts, but didn't complete them. This one was completed by the end of 2005. But what was I saying? The point I was trying to make there. The hair being what it was, that sort of thing. I was happy with that, pleased with the the way it came out too. But I did come to notice something though. I wasn't sure how I felt about these forms within the back. Now there's a lot of detail, as you can see. This is a black and white photo, but so naturally I had to translate this black and white photo to the color, bring it up through the color, through the flesh tones, in a way where I could translate that. And it's not easy to do. Really, how do I put it? I had to do that, but at the same time I'm trying to, while I'm painting it, trying to educate myself in, concentrating on the tones and true modulations, right? Softened. And I remember doing this, and at one point it was very hard and contrast. The things, the shapes were snaked together and locked together, and it looked really mechanical. And I'm like, how can I soften that? And I couldn't really come up with other ways to do it other than just washing stuff over it, softening it. And in a way, I look at it today, if I was to attempt this again, that's how I'd go. I go in with a drier brush, if you know what I mean. People who paint know what that means. For example, when I was talking about pen and ink work, when your markers start to die, the black ones, you can use them as a modulated gray medium tone between the black and white, right? Well, you can do that with paint too. When you first put on paint wet, it is what it is. The color, it is what it is. But when you got pigment on the brush that isn't wet, sloppy wet, and it's still on there, and you touch the canvas, it comes off on the canvas, but it's dab, 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 and you bring it up slowly. And I think that's something that should have taken place as I was bringing up these, these segments and sections here. Soften that up, smoothen it out, modulate. But it is what it is, right? I mean, the form's there and all that. It's not a bad painting, right? But I could see that, getting to this level of realism here was going to take some time. And actually, tell you the truth, I went back into the archives and I found, hold on now, I don't know if they're all here. Well, here's two of them anyway. Some of my preliminary drawings. Now these ones here, I don't know if they'll come up because these are, hold on, let me take it out of the plastic here. This is just pencil sketch, right? And you know, it's graphite, so it's probably hard to see here. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it's, you know, the rough outline sketch, whatever, right? There's that one. I think I have a smaller one in my 2005 binder in my archive. But here is the more important one. I remember laboring over this. It was actually, I was laboring over this area where the thumb was and stuff. I was never quite satisfied. I was looking directly at the reference, but the reference to me wasn't clear enough itself. And it was really giving me trouble. But where I started really having trouble, and it wasn't really trouble, it's just that I was seeing what I was seeing, but I wasn't sure how I felt about it. It came to the, when it came to the, oh boy, well, the, you know, the contours, hold on a second, get that out of there. There's probably some glare on there. When it came to the contours of, you know, the radiuses and contours of the mouth and the nose, the bulb on the nose, and the shape of the forehead, and the way the eye socket was, like, I kept drawing it, right? And I'm like, what's wrong with this? I kept drawing it and drawing it and drawing it. And I'd look at the reference and I'd do it again, and it kept coming out the same. And then finally I realized that, no, the rendering was, you know, was the way it was. I mean, all these bulbs and radiuses were right. The distances, the measurements were correct. And it kept coming out the same. So I thought, oh no, I see what's going on. You just don't want it that way. And that's what I think was happening here. I don't know. How do I put this? I thought this was a beautiful picture, right? But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know about how I want to place the profile, the radiuses in the profile. Like, what is that? But anyway, as you can see, look at that. The bulb of the nose, I took it off and I kind of straightened the nose and stuff. All right, I left the chin basically the same, right? And the lips, basically the same. Only the line between the lips didn't jut up into that slight kind of smile that you might be able to pick up there and see. I don't know if you can. There, that changed a little bit. But yeah, I started changing the face. And, you know, I'm not sure I should have done that, but it didn't matter for the overall effect of the painting. I went with that. And that's what it was. It was Kineska at leisure in front of the waves there. Had contemplated the whole moon thing and stuff, but I decided that since the light source on this was coming from Buddy doing the camera work, that the light source, the moon, would probably be, you know, up the other way, right? Coming down on her back as she's, you know, she's got her back toward the viewer. So I went with that. And that's all great. But that was the one that inspired my buddy to say, oh, would you want to teach a class in anatomy? That's what that was about. That's how that came about. That was the one painting that left that impression. Yeah, so as I say, I'm going to go ahead and do the repairs on this guy, right? Quite a few nicks here. So I'm going to have to come up with these colors and mix my paints and get as close to these colors as I can. You know, the different tones of violet and plum color through this cloaky drapery here. And the blue I'm not too worried about. That's easy enough to get to. The black and navy, that'll bring it right up. And then it should be okay, but I'll give it a coat this time to give it some protection and then put it away for a while. I went ahead and made some shrunken down photocopies so I could you know, store them in binders and put another version of it in my portfolio and stuff, so I don't have to carry this around, sort of thing. You know what I mean? So that's about it for that one. Kineska at Leisure, 2005, around November. On the board for a little bit of repair. Oil on canvas. Oh, and P.S. folks, on the whole, you know, I mentioned that I um, got a photocopy on this baby, right? To file it in the archives and stuff. I'll be talking about photocopying and that sort of thing at the end of this video, especially in public. Yeah. And like I said, sometimes these things get ahead of me before I go ahead and film a process or whatever. It doesn't really matter to me in the sense that as long as I keep working. Yeah, there's this guy here. We're looking at the size. It's about 15.5 by 9.5. India ink, some Sharpies, some fine liners, etc. White acrylic paint for correction fluid, you know, before, you know, the photocopies were made. But this was actually another, I don't know, just kind of paying my respects to one of the late greats. That would be another John Romita picture. If you remember the last on board episodes, I was doing a kind of a, I guess you could call it, well, it's not quite, but kind of photorealistic type of comic book art of the movie character of Doctor Strange. Well, I was still going through reference material for Doctor Strange in the comic books, and I came up with a few of them. And one of the ones I hit was this one here. And I found this one in, not from the actual issue, actually. I got it in a black and white rendition that was in my Spider-Man Essentials copy. I think it's number 5. I don't have it. Wait a minute. I do have it in front of me somewhere. I was just looking at it. Yeah, it's volume 5. And it's actually a depiction or the inked, uncolored version from The Amazing Spider-Man 109 from June 1972. And in this one, I saw the panel that was really quite small, right? Much smaller than this. I mean, probably, I'd say about this size here of just this portion here, this whole panel, right? But what I sometimes do, if I find something that's inspiring enough, I'll go and blow it up a little bit, right? And then in my actual drawing, when I decide to tackle it, I'll blow it up even bigger. Sometimes you can use gridding or, you know, just eyeball it. In this case, you know, I didn't go for the exact, but here's my reference. Now, one of the things you'll notice about this reference, I don't know if you can make this out, but I'll try and point it out, is that the action lines Romita would put in here, see these lines, the action lines from, you know, from Spidey and from Doctor Strange zipping out of off the rooftop there. He'd continue them in his black spaces. See his large black portions here, where he puts in his dark inks? He'd continue them by, like, a dotted line that would be the continuation of these action lines. Just gonna say right off the top, I don't like that. Didn't like it. Didn't like that at all. So I eliminated that on my drawing when I put it in. At first I started peppering it a little bit, and I did pepper some of the black stuff, the black lines. But in the end, when it came to the white stuff, I didn't like it. It kind of reminded me of snow or something. I understood the purpose of it and what he was going for, but I don't know. I just preferred the straight blacks were better. I liked the straight blacks were better, and I figured maybe these action lines and these swiped images here, these swiping or sweeping, you know, movement lines here. You can see I was thinking hopefully they'll hold enough weight to carry the action without peppering through the black, right? And even here you see it a little bit staggered. But I went ahead and did that. Many mistakes, though. Yeah, I had some trouble with the hands there and had to go back in with the white out and redo it. In Spidey's face and his mask, his eyes looked too dissimilar, so I had to go back in with white out correction fluid. But overall, not too bad. Just minor spots, really. Looking if there's something major there. Oh, yeah, I guess there was a sweep here. where I didn't like the way the inks were coming in there, so I sweeped it with correction fluid and went ahead and did it. But yeah, that was my reference. And folks, you know, don't be afraid to use references. I mean, enough already. But yeah, that was my little tribute to him. And I think this is more one of those, you know, it's one of those pleasure drawings more than anything, right? You're not out to prove anything. You just, wow, you know. It's like you're, when I'm doing something like this, it's like a three headed education, right? First of all, I'm trying to emulate, and I'm trying to say, well, let's see if how close I can get to John, to John and his way of doing things. Let's see how close I can, but just for the sense of rendering. The other thing is, you know, it's just a labor where you're trying to just pull things together to see if you can do it. Even, you know, outside of the actual artist you're trying to emulate, just the whole workload thing, and how you're trying to find out how fast can you do this and stuff. And, you know, there were times where things like this brickwork, putting that in and stuff, was just, oh God, it took forever. Like, not all the line work you put in is fun. I'll put it that way, right? Different portions of the work is going to be funner. But yeah, I went ahead and did that, and I was happy with it. It was fun. This one, you know, this one isn't going to the same young man. This one will stick with me in my portfolio. I did make some copies and stuff to hand out to you know, different I don't know, possible opportunities, whatever, or just for show, whatever. But yeah, references, folks. See, this reference here is from that Essentials number 5 I told you about, but it's blown up. Like, this is like probably, I don't know, at least 200%, you know, of the actual. But it's, you know, if you find a reference that, like, you're flipping through one of your old, don't, you know, God, for God's sake, use your collections as reference material whenever you can. I mean, don't be afraid to do that. You know, you can learn from these guys. But the thing is, if you're talking about like a 2.5 by, I don't know, 4-inch panel or something, it's kind of tiny, right? You know, what's the point? Blow it up, you know? Blow it up so you can really get a good look. Because you got to remember that most of these images are shrunk down before they go into print anyway. It's just the way most people know that anyway. I don't have to tell them that. But go ahead, blow them up, so you can really get a better idea of the artist's hand and what they were intending. So that when you go to study their work and do your own renderings, you know where it's coming from, is basically what I'm saying. So I went ahead with that and finished that off. That was done, actually that was done in, that was finished by the end of January sometime. I'm not, what do we got here? No, it doesn't say, it says January, but it doesn't say, what day that was. But oh well, there it is. I'm trying to think. I'm looking at this reference here, right? I'm trying to think, like, you know, what were the major differences I put in? I think there was, well, if you look at Spidey's web hand there as he's shooting his web spinner or whatever, really unclear, you know. So I had to really, you know, just get down to drawing a full outline of the hand, make it a bit clearer. What else? Yeah, like I said, I removed a lot of that white speckling. You know, that was, you know, it's all through this, actually. All through this black work, you see the white speckling. Yeah, those are the major changes. But other than that, it's pretty true to the original. And, I don't know, it was a lot of fun. It took a lot longer than I had liked, though. I thought to myself, man, you know, I love doing it, sitting there doing it. It's just that I thought about it as far as vocation goes, and I'm thinking, well, man, I don't know. Like, I can do this stuff. I can do it, but the time, I don't. I'd have to, I should. How do I put this? As someone who's learning, you don't want to be worried so much about time. You're worried about your craft. But I'm saying, like, when you think about getting a job like that, you're gonna have demands on your time. And I started really thinking about that while I was doing this. But anyway, there it is. It's again, it's Doctor Strange and Spidey from the issue 109 back in June '72. It's what do we got here? It's page 11. According to, I wrote this down at the time. I hope I was correct. Yeah, it's page 11, and it's panel 1 at the top of the page there. So there it is, by the late John Romita, my little tribute. Another tribute to John. Now, it's at this point I want to mention, something about the referencing. As you can see here, we've got various... a variety of images here from different artists. And what you're really looking at here is just, I had made a trip, I do it every 2 weeks or so, to get some photocopies of some of my work to shrink down to, 8.5 by 11, whatever, binder size stuff, so I can put it in archives or manage it better while I can put the larger works away and stuff. But when I go in there, I often do this sort of thing where I'll crack open my references, my books and whatnot, and look at references for different reasons, right? And sometimes I blow them up to get a better look at them. Like I said, for example, a lot of these are 155%. 160, sometimes as a matter of 200, but for different reasons, all sorts of different reasons. Sometimes it's a matter of just favorite images to blow up for actual framework. Nothing really here comes to mind. The images are big enough for that, but since they're coming from a newsprint, many of them, they're just not of that glossy quality, right? Right, but some of them are, though. Some of them are. For example, if you look over here at this guy here, we got this, actually this whole section, really, I could say something about it. These are Keith Pollard images. Keith Pollard, one of the more underrated guys that doesn't get mentioned a lot. You got to understand that Keith Pollard was my go-to guy when it came to Spider-Man when I was a kid, like the Spider-Man comic books per se. Age, we're talking between 8 and 11 years old, right? And by 11, I started reading actual back issues of the Spider-Man issues I had. Like, I had them and I collected them for the longest time, but I didn't always read them. I was learning to draw, but it's by 11 you start getting, you're so sophisticated, right? And you start reading. But as I said, like, some of these, for example, because it's newsprint, it's not high gloss, so it's not really worth that sort of framing here. But something like this, that is copied from the cover, and here's the actual issue itself. That's 193, from back in the day. Let's see. That would be 70, it would be 1979. And, what we're looking at there is not one of his more spectacular foes, but I just thought, and more so now when I look at it, just that this figure is so perfect that Pollard pulled off here. I think it's just a great shot. Anatomically, I don't know if he used a reference for this pose or not. I kind of doubt it. It just came off so great. And so I decided to go ahead and blow it up and take a look, and I'll use it to study, And that's what that's about. Let's see. Up top there, we got this is a direct 100, direct actual 100% copy of Andrew Ross, or sorry, Andrew Ross, Ross Andrew depiction of Spider-Man. And by the time, like Ross Andrew was a pretty big deal at the time. I was being influenced by Keith Pollard as well. And I'll tell you why. Because Ross Andrew at this time, his images were still coming through, straight through the 70s. But by the time I was reading this stuff, and then some, into the 200s and so on and so forth, they were already reprinting Ross Andrews stuff. So it was already, penetrating this kid's imagination at the time, right? So I was already becoming familiar with it. But a lot of this stuff, like Pollard, these artists Pollard and Ross, they just didn't register as names for me. I'd recognize the work for sure, and they were there. And they, as I was trying to learn how to draw, I knew that rendering images like this meant you were getting somewhere, right? Then over here you got something from Herb Trimpe, right? Picking up on that? Herb Trimpe, yeah. He took over the Incredible Hulk in the later half of the 60s. And he started to get a name for himself, I guess. He started getting recognized as that particular artist. Now that image itself, let's see here. That one, I have this written down. I pulled it up from, oh yeah, right, okay. I pulled it up from, I got another image here. Oh yeah, right, here we go. Let's see. Right. Oh boy. This is from issue number 135. Now, oh boy. 1970, right? Page 11, panel. Oh, no. This is not page 11. This one I'm not. This is page 17, actually. Now, whether it's the actual page 17 of that issue in 70, I don't know. I think so. But the reason I don't know is that this particular version I got from a reprint. Again, Trimpe's work was being reprinted in 79. So by the time I was 8 or 9, the work had already been displayed, but it was coming back as a reprint. I think this was under the title of Marvel Superheroes. Sort of like the Secret Wars Superheroes thing, whatever that title, you know what I mean? But that was in 79. And they reprinted that. And I picked this one because I recently watched that little documentary, that black and white documentary on Trimpe and his rantings and ravings about, I don't know, New York life and his random thoughts, whatever. And he mentioned that he had, they didn't show work like this, but he mentioned that he had an interest in World War in the World War aviators, right? Like here he's referencing biplanes from that era, right? And if you look here, this is turn of the century tank stuff here. He just loved to reference this stuff, so we put this through and put it on one of his panels. This one is a full page splash. He put with our green buddy here off to the side, right? But yeah, he wanted to reference the mechanics, involved in that. But I didn't know about that. I knew about his work with that character, but I didn't know he was his interest spilt over into his work. So that's an example of Trimpy. Actually, this is a pretty cool issue, and I photocopied in black and white some of the other stuff involving Kang, some of the headshots, and some of the splash, like the splash page at the beginning. I have them nearby somewhere, but yeah, because I wanted to take a look at those and study them. It looks like he was a shoo-in to come in, you know, and render things that were they were Kirby-like in their simplicity, and they were Kirby-like in their design, but, you know, it had his particular individual stamp put on them too. Interesting. So anyway, ripped a few of those there. But, you know, blow up your references. If you're interested in something and you're going to look into something, then, you know, take those smaller images, blow them up. Blow them up. Let's see, what else is on the board here? Oh, there's so many, but I just put on a few to give you an example, you know. Now, over here, you recognize, old Shellhead. And this isn't Tales of Suspense, first appearance, but no, it was his first premiere issue being advertised. Actually, it was advertised in the back of one of my 60s comics. Here from 68. Yeah. Yeah. In the back of number 60, Amazing Spider-Man, very back page, the very back page was advertising, yeah, Submariner run. There's the Buscema, famous cover there, probably recognize. I blew that one up too because that one had an impact too. In the Tales of To Astonish reprints that I picked up as a kid. I remember looking at that and going, wow, that's really good. And, you know, discovering that right around the time that we kids were discovering the How to Draw Comics Marvel Way hardcover book that was found in a library. God, man, the kids would fight over that one. It's so hard to get, right? Different story for a different video. But yeah, this is when old Shellhead was getting his own book. Now, I believe, let's see now, does it have a, I believe that's a Gene Colan image, right? I believe it's a Gene Colan image, but it could be a Tuska. I'm not sure. If anyone else, I'll find out eventually. I always do, but if anyone else knows, just leave it in the comments and let us know. But anyway, stuff like that. Like some of these will, I'll take these, and if they're presentable enough, I'll frame them, right? And I'll put them up. But this is another pulpy one, so I probably won't do that. But I'll blow it up, put a board in it, and slap it in my collection. So the title will be in amongst the Iron Man books. It's just a silly thing to do. But yeah, the referencing usually has, I'll tell you straight, usually has a more practical reason for it, you know? But you go, if you're doing this sort of thing, a lot of times you're going to, you know, you go in with your work, right? You go in with your paintings, you break them up or shrink them down, or you go in with your pen and ink drawings and you break them up or shrink them down or blow them up even, whatever. And you do this sort of thing kind of while you're at it. This isn't as necessary as the other. But, you know, a lot of the times it's for real practical reasons, right? You know, like, for example, I was in there today taking these, I just went in with a red fine liner marker, Sharpie, and did these, but blew them up to like this kind of size so I could really look at the full images and maybe put a graph on it for what I would call reproduction work. Like that Doctor Strange picture I just showed you, it's not the same. I changed it. I like the figures and the image in that, but it's a reproduction. You know what I mean? It's a reproduction. Let me show you what I mean there. I'll give you an example of someone you might recognize that was doing reproduction work. Hold on. A famous one, actually. Okay, so some of you may recognize this image here. Okay, this is an Overstreet comic book price guide from 2003, right? But the image itself, if you look at it, it's what? It's Marvel Comics #1 from back in the day, right? With the original Human Torch on there and stuff. Well, actually, what this is, the reason, I'm showing you this is that if you look down here in the credits, this is what it says. It's Murphy Anderson, right? After Frank R. Paul. Meaning that Murphy, from DC Comics fame, I don't know if you remember, from the 60s, a little earlier too, I suppose. I'm not sure about his full history, but you can find out about Murphy Anderson. I've seen him in interviews and that sort of thing. But he was commissioned to go in and look at the original and do a reproduction. It's like drawing the same thing, right? Trying to get it as close as you can. And, I guess certain guys are more skilled at that than others. And that's an example of a commercial reproduction of someone else's work, comic book work, from, a later time. From an earlier time. And, and in one of his interviews, I think, you can find it on YouTube, he's talking, they ask him exactly, what are you up to now, Murphy? Are you doing anything now? After all these years? And this is the kind of thing he was talking about, and they actually show this image. So yeah, a lot of times, things like this, I'll be considering, doing recreations of the actual images. And there's so many of them, right? But it's actually a good habit, and you can learn a lot. For example, I remember just towards the end of the year, I started inking some of the penciled work, the John Buscema stuff from that How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way publication. And one of the things that I was affected by was John's, as I'd run the pen over the lines, I could see that, I was getting each phalange in the fingers and stuff, and I realized that, the hands are very special. Each component is a different ink line sort of thing and stuff, which was very important. But I showed this issue, to show where the Iron Man ad came from in '68. But I want to mention something on the back of that. I don't know if you can see the printing. I started doing this about a year ago. And this is leading me to the whole reference thing. What I started doing is, at the top you get the titles, and you find out who was doing what, the writing, the inking, the art, whatever. But I'd go through the pages and I'd look at them for reference. So you might look at, say, it says pages 1, 2, and 3, great tussle sequence between Spidey and the Kingpin, so a fighting sequence to look at. Panel 5, panel 6, gorgeous Gwen Stacy profile, Gwen Gaze. Page 7, in an ad, there's a Daredevil pose, right? Not sure of the artist. I was looking at it again, and I was thinking Gene Colan, maybe? But, yeah, so as I pull these out now, and I'm flipping through them, I take the board behind, right, and just print out any reference that I think is important. And that brings me around to something that I mentioned. And there's various stuff. Like before I touch upon what I want to segue into. See, here's another example of a page from How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way of Buscema's pencils, right? Now, I blew that up, and what I'll do is I'll take this, and, you know, go around, take a look at it, remove any unnecessary lines, which are rare in these ones. He was really tight on these for, I don't know if it was for the publication or he was always like that, just as an artist. But I'll do that, and then I'll, you know, I'll put my inks on it. You know what I mean? Test the hand at ink. I already started doing that, but I haven't done all of the ones that I'd like to. So there's things like that. That's a reason to reference or photocopy. Oh hell, hey, look, just today, one of the Ultimate Edition Fantastic Fours, in the back there was some original pencil work. They had samples of it, and again, I'd take something like that, blow up the pencils. This one's going to be tough because I noticed there's a lot of gray smeared through these originals. I don't know if it's actual graphite or not. I don't think it is. It can't really be because, actually, I have some questions about that. There were several pages they added in the back there, penciled work, but I question it because I know the stuff was inked and published, so I'm thinking, what are these extra pencils of the same book? If anyone has any insight on that, just let me know. I'm going to go back and actually read the captions and stuff, and find out what that's about. But yeah, so I'll take something like this and go ahead and apply the inks to that, you know, the Kirby tech and the rest of the art and stuff. There's a few of them, and depending on how it goes, I'll figure it out. Well, anyway, there are some of the reasons, but I don't know if you remember, but I was talking about, I think it was within the last couple of videos, but I was talking about, you know, dynamic posing or anatomy rendered under dynamic action, that sort of thing. And I mentioned a guy named Gil Kane, which some of you are more than familiar with. And in particular, like I said before, like the you know, although Pollard was some of my earliest, you know, go-to guys for Spider-Man as I was learning how to draw these comics as a kid, you know, and then Andrew Ross for one. Ross Andrews. I keep saying that tonight. But no, Ross Andrews' work. There were things about these guys that made me gravitate towards them. But as I went back through the Marvel history, and I got to the point where Gil Kane was doing Spider-Man imagery, right? You know, again, from the... I got my... I have some issues, but a lot of the stuff just came from my essentials. And I came across stuff like this, right? Now, you know, there's reasons why I would blow up these images, right? Because I'm going to make a study of Gil Kane. I mentioned that, you know, I used to look at these images and think, well, this guy is incredible. Look at the angles he's hitting and stuff. You know, he must have had like an, you know, must have been, where did he get these images? Did he get them like in Sports Illustrated or something? Like, what's going on here? These look like, you know, actual imagery from, you know, pole vaulting or gymnastics and stuff. And recently, I was listening to, look at that. Isn't that fantastic? The Gobby and our boy there in the splash page. Yeah, these are just black and white, blown up, you know, I guess 155%. I don't know. I'm not sure. I can't remember. I played around a lot with them. But these poses are just extraordinary. Like, you can learn anatomy and kinesiology and all of that, right? But if you can't twist the figure and look at the muscle bellies from all angles and stuff, then, you know, there's something lacking in that. There's still I'll put it this way, there's still a place to go in your education, you know, to learn that. And I certainly want to try, you know, get better at that. It's like releasing your figures from a stiffness that, say, you might find in like oh, I don't know. We'll use Hogarth as an example. Look at this stuff, right? The contortion, you know, high action, but putting them in these poses that are just extraordinary and knowing how the limbs and muscle bellies look rendered under those various angles. That's the point. That's the stuff that really got me. Look at this. I mean, go on. Get out of town. Look at that stuff. And, you know, again, you know, these images, a lot of them were very small. We're talking, you know, a few inches across the page and stuff. But I blow them up. And, you know, quite a large size. It's another example. Like, I mean, get out of town. Unbelievable. Yeah, I certainly... This is one of the main reasons referencing is important to me and why I spend, you know, a little bit of time, you know, I try and budget it, right? Because I can't afford it. Blowing up some of the images that, you know, that I'm going to be studying, that I need to take a closer look at, right? Some of them maybe even be for reproduction. But I feel so strongly about this particular topic, about anatomy under a plethora of positions and angles and stuff, that what I want to do, I've been thinking this over, is just catalog a lot of these poses. A very rough hand, gloss over, where I can just, you know, put a series of the poses, not all just clumped together, but, okay, all of these are aerial shots. All of these are images of the figure coming towards the camera, and you're looking from a worm's eye view. You know, the different camera angles, different positions, different situations. Recoiling from a punch, or being thrown off a building, or leaping forward. All of that, right? And put them together and reference them and just look at them and go over them again and again until, you know, after drawing them again and again in their simplest forms. When I say simplest forms, it's like if I was to take an image of our hero here, right? And I outlined the basic image, there's no need to go in with the detail of the webbing and his costume. We even know who he is, right? You can keep the face blank. You just want to get those forms in and get enough of those action figures in to catalog. And, you know, referencing to me is important, okay? Some people go in without that and don't do that. But you know what? I'm just going to say it. That's fine, you know. Obviously, in the industry, a lot of people go more cartoony, and some were very fortunate with taking that approach, you know. I think, I don't really know what the case was with Kirby when it came to referencing. I knew that some of the things he drew were at times unrealistic, and you wonder, did he really know how to draw a car? Or you know. John Buscema, for example, told us all in an interview that, you know, right, as great as he was as a figure drawer, like his Conan work, amazing. He didn't like his superhero stuff too much, which was a surprise to me, but it's no longer a surprise. I've known it for years. But he'd say things like, oh, any technicals? And he goes, oh, vehicles, oh, cars. I couldn't draw a car to save my... And I've looked at some of the old stuff that he did, and I'm looking at it, I'm going, oh my God, that looks like a cardboard box with another cardboard box on top. Like, you know, it's amazing, like, strengths and weaknesses amongst the artists. So, you know, it's important to reference things, especially the stuff you're weaker at and you don't know. And he would say, yeah, I have to reference this stuff because I know nothing about it. I spend no time studying it and whatever. Me, I would be like, well, maybe you should spend some time with it, or, you know, a little bit here and there, you know, whatever. I mean, if you're referencing it and you're drawing it, then you should be learning. I don't know. But, it made me think, well, yeah, you know, there are certain works that I've done, and I'll show you in future vids some of the pictures of background scene, city shots that I've done, they're fine, and you look at them, they're detailed in that, but then you start looking at things like vehicles and stuff, and they look kind of funny, like toys or something, right? So that would be something that I would have to reference to get it right until I could get it right. So that's the importance of these things. But after telling you all of these things about the copies and referencing and stuff, let me talk to you about something else, which is ridiculous, And it's, you're going to run into this sort of thing anyway if you decide to go and do that. If you're picking up your references instead of online, actual physical copies that you can pin up on your board and then look at and study and draw and doodle with, right? You're going to get, okay, I'm putting this out there today because this is something that happened today. And I'm going to mention something else that also happened. And you just can't, there's no sense in even being careful. I'll put it this way. If you're good, you're good. And you have nothing to prove. Just do your shit and let the fucking spit fly and let people talk, all right? Because there's a lot of envious artists out there who can't draw their way out of a paper bag. It's true. But they're not really invested in it. They dream about, I'd love to be better and this and that. But they don't invest energy in it. And a lot of them are right here on YouTube, and they invest more energy into their videos. And that's all fine, well and good, all right? I've expressed my opinion about how I don't really, that's not my goal, that's not my interest. But the thing is, some of them are just plain malicious and envious. And they're always looking for something within their own inadequacies as artists. And sometimes it comes down to personality, looking for some sort of weakness, try to exploit your, downfall, whatever. You're better than them, and not as a boast, but it just happens to be the case. You've done your homework and you continue to study. They just keep rendering the same old shit over and over again. They don't believe in studying. They don't believe in referencing. If they have a weakness and they can't draw a certain thing, they won't take the time to sit down for 2 weeks and just study the foot or just study eyes or whatever the case may be. Or in my case, where I need to study better. I got a little bit better, but I'd have to study horses, or I'd have to start looking at cars and getting familiar with that because it's a weakness, so you concentrate. But instead of doing that, what they do is just go around trying to, flip shit on other people, And when you go in and you're, like today, what happened was, as I was doing my own thing, copying my stuff, shrinking it down, and then I pulled out this stuff before I went to get, I want this image and that image. There was a mother and a daughter that came in, and they started laughing, and the one started, he's stealing stuff, and it was a big joke, and the clerk was there, and he got in on it, and I'm like, for fuck's sake, they have no idea what these are for, right? What do you mean stealing it? What, I'm going to publish it and make money? Look, I wouldn't invest this kind of energy into something unless it was for a reason, and that certainly can't be the reason, right? But no, so you're going to get this idea. Also, when it comes to referencing, like say you're doing, say you want to study all Gil Kane, Green Goblin or something that I'm interested in. And as I mentioned, Spidey's anatomy, and the different angles, right? And all that I think Gil just went to town with. Found out that he had an interest in gymnastics, and it really showed. And there was something about his technique that I heard recently too. He would do his roughed out sketches of his figures, then he would go in and light box the basic image of those figures after all the rough work's in. Oh, man! And I thought about that, and I thought, oh my God, that's a lot of time. I hope it was fast. Because that's like you're doing the drawing twice, really. It's unbelievable. But anyway, the work really showed. But, if you're doing all that stuff, you want to be looking at those references. And if you decide to do a recreation, Or perhaps you want to study the poses for your own work. So you're looking at the figure from all these different angles until you get used to anatomy at those different angles, especially hands coming at you or drawn away, or limbs behind the person, or one limb off to the side, or an aerial over top of a foreshortened figure. All that stuff. You know, you got to use fucking images or references, right? But to a lot of fucking these losers who keep struggling, they just keep, they can't draw, but it's a lot of times it's not for the reasons they think. They think, oh, it's just a matter of talent. But the other thing they think is, oh, these people are just tracing photographs or references and stuff. And it's like, no, you idiot. It's like, okay, if you, and I talked about this before, if you talk about ultimate referencing, like in art class, many of you will know, when you start to study the human figure, what you end up doing is getting a figure, a model, to come in and pose, and they sit there, and you draw them, right? That's life drawing, right? Well, the next best thing to the actual thing is what? A photograph, stupid! Right? So, you know, half of the time you don't really know what they're talking about, what they are talking about, and they don't know what they're talking about. They think that one, you know, they'll be sitting next to someone who can just, like, okay, you know, it's just one of those things. I can sit down and draw you something right in front of your face. No references or anything, right? Now, something with a reference will ring clearer and truer a lot of the time, especially during the days when I was learning anatomy. I'll put it that way. Like, I could render a full figure and face and the whole image, right? And I have tons of that stuff piled up in the archives, right? But you'll look at it and you'll say, well, this isn't quite right. This leg doesn't quite right. That's because even though it was coming out of my imagination and memory, that's because I wasn't referencing, right? And if you haven't learned the anatomy and you're not referencing, what do you expect? See, they think it just comes down to a matter of talent or people fucking cheating. They're stupid. And they're not learning. They just keep spitting out the same shit, expecting to get better. You know, they don't want any challenges. And a lot of them, folks, let's just face it, they're more concerned with their channel than they are actual art. But some of them are so fucking delusional. Like, you look at it and you're like, are you fucking serious, bud? But, I mean, you know, you don't want to be discouraging, but at the same time, it's like, I see what your problem is. I could probably show you, but you aren't going to listen. You don't listen. You just keep bullshitting. I saw a guy go on, it was a few weeks ago, and he, you know, he gets up there and he does his little comic book stuff, and it's quite frankly, when you see it, you recognize his style. Now, I'll put it that way. But I'll put it this way. Style doesn't mean shit. Okay? You don't work on style. Okay? I'm going to tell you a secret, folks. You don't work on style. You develop a style. A style develops organically as you're learning your craft. See, as you're learning the fundamentals, you know, anatomy, composition, storytelling in the case of comic books, whatever. As you're learning those things, even some guys in the industry learn to draw by inking for years. They'll ink over the masters, right? And then eventually they don't even know it, but what do you call it? It's like, I was going to say it's neuromuscular memory, but it's more to it than that. Something happening in the hand, in the eye, and the brain as they're going around rendering the outlines of these forms. They're actually learning how to draw. A part of their brain is. So eventually, a lot of them become artists as well. But the thing is, style is nothing. Style is your personal DNA stamp on your art that is just going to come up anyway. And people will look at it and they'll say, oh, I recognize it. This is the way his lines are. This is the way they, yeah, you know, it has a certain look to it, right? But, you know, you could put shit out there, you know, every week or whatever, and I could look at it and say, yeah, it looks like looked like someone I know, right? And, you know, and because he has his own personal style, but that doesn't mean it's good, you know. The style you have will always be the style you have, but that has nothing to do with skill. And so when someone's telling you things like, oh yeah, you know, you got a unique style, or you know, the real bullshitters where they say, that's cover worthy, I'm telling you. And you're like, thanks, man, that really means enough. You know, some of these guys, it's like, you're dumb enough to believe that? And then if you say anything to challenge that, they're more concerned with the fact that you're not being nice, you're being a hater. You hater. No, I'm trying to teach you a thing or two you should know. And stop wasting your time. Like, stop acting like, right? You know. The wannabes, there's something there personality-wise. And I'm not talking about skill. Like, a lot of them could probably be better artists if they just got a different mindset. But they just don't have what it takes to sit down and want to learn. They think it's all emotional, you know. Just give me compliments, right? And I use that metaphor of Aunt Sally. Oh, you're so talented. Don't you stop. Here's some markers, Johnny. You know, right? And pat you on the back and get you some milk and cookies. No. Eventually you got to look at things and say, well, do I really want to learn how to do this? You got to get hungry for it. But I'm sorry, a lot of that hunger is gone because of their channels. And it's just happening. It was what was it, a couple weeks ago or something? Someone, and it's funny. It's funny, like recently I started talking about old school inking, where I wanted to use a paintbrush, you know, Winsor Newton 3 or you know, or number 4, right? To render outlines on the inked comic book work instead of just tack pens or nibs or whatever. Get that old school feel for the handwriting. I went ahead and did that, started doing that, and I'll probably use it a bit more because I really love it. So the next thing I know, some fucking twack, he gets out there, he did the same thing when I started using acrylic on paper. He started, I'll use some acrylic paint. Like, doesn't have a fucking clue about anything. And I get it. If you think something's going to work and you see someone do something, you want to try it yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. Don't get me wrong. But when you're not, you know, you can't just, how do I put this? Mock somebody thinking you're going to get better if you don't understand what you're fucking doing in the first place. He got out there with the paintbrush. He says, you know, and he wanted to act like he was always using a paintbrush and, you know, whatever for his inks. He says, this is the paintbrush I usually use, right? And it's like, you never use a paintbrush. What the fuck are you talking about? I've watched you. And as he says, this is the paintbrush I usually use. And he pulls the price tag off of it. He went and bought the fucking brush for the fucking video he was making that day. Like, just stop that shit. Anyway, and he's sitting there and he's inking his lines, right? I would really like to actually use an example. I pulled one up earlier today, but anyway, it was of a hand, right? And I wanted to explain how, you know, each of the lines around a finger in each digit, it's sectioned into 3, and each phalange has a certain shape, and there's radiuses, like, you know, that you got to pay attention to, and, you know, the contours of the knuckle and that stuff when you're putting in your ink lines. Inking an outline of a hand close up, for example, is a little bit different. And, you know, I basically, you know, you got to understand that, like, if you just make a tube, you know, the fingers are all going to look like fucking hot dogs or something. They're not going to look like fingers, right? So that, basically what it was saying is that these single stroke lines. Now remember that term, single stroke lines. 1, and then 2, and then 3, and then 4. All combined do your outline, right? But this guy, he comes in and he's the inker now, right? Hey, look at me, I'm the inker now. And he's sitting there doing this instead of putting in these lines for an outline of the figure, which, look, all I'm going to say to you, PD, is take a look at Gary Martin or someone like that in action. You know, what you want when you're doing inking on outlines, you're not going to hear this. You can't hear. Fuck all. You're too fucking stupid and you're too busy worrying about, you know, smearing people behind their backs and shit. I'm trying to tell you straight up. And, you know, but you won't listen. You're dumb. You're dumb. You're dead. It's all about your fucking channel, everything you say, and you don't care about the truth. And I noticed that when it came to fact checking too. But anyway, instead of doing your single stroke on the, like here, say, right? Instead of a single stroke here like this, and then another single stroke here for this contour, and you know, instead of doing that, which is the way you're supposed to do it, right? Because it gives the line a certain look. He's sitting there going like this on those contour lines. Like he's coloring with a goddamn wax crayon or something. Oh yeah, I'm a real inker. No, if your fucking hand's doing this, you're painting. You're not inking. You got to slow down. Okay, whenever... I'm going to have to do a whole video on it and just show how it's done. That's what I want to do. I'm going to use my samples of Infinita's hand and show you the right way and the wrong way. To just put in the lines. What you want, basically, is to be doing a single stroke line. You don't, if you have a line this long, you want to put it in with one stroke, right? One stroke. Why? Because any tapering, any thinning or thickening of the line will be graceful and gradual. It will modulate. But if you go in there and go like this, you're going to have a fucking line that's all over the fucking place as far as its width. And it's not going to be graceful. It's going to look like shit, which is what you ended up with. Pictures that look like shit. But I used the brush. Would you stop it? Learn how to fucking do it. Don't just get up there. Oh, I'm painting. I'm making a video. You know, like, that's great. You're making a video. But your art is shit, buddy. And I'm not trying to insult you. I'm saying there's a reason why. Because you won't do the work. You know? You just think you think it's like all fun. Right? Oh, isn't it so fun to draw? Yeah, it's fun to draw. For a lot of people, it's a real passion and a love. But a lot of it's work, too, in learning the craft. If you think it's all about, like, just jacking off on the page, like, give me a break. You're never going to improve that way. So I'm just saying. But the real purpose of this was to discuss something about referencing, and if you're doing photocopies in public, you're gonna get all sorts of assholes that don't even fucking have anything to do with the industry or know anything that you're trying to accomplish or know anything about the craft itself coming up and just assuming that you got to be up to no good. You're stealing something or you're, using someone else. It's like fucking, there's nothing you can do about that. Except to sit them down and say, look, I'll draw you a picture right fucking now, and then I want you to go fuck off, okay? And just shut up. You don't know what you're fucking talking about. You don't know about referencing. Oh, God. Some of the things I heard about lightboxing in the industry, from some of the greats, like fucking, Buscema and Adams and even Joe Kuber, where these things had a place in advertising and whatever. I went through and learned the hard way. I talked about this before. I learned the hard way because I didn't believe in those kind of things. I saw a light box when I was a kid. Oh, must have been 9 years old, around 1979. And I thought, oh, isn't that kind of interesting, right? Some kids got one and they were tracing images and that. But I didn't, I thought, yeah, cool, but I didn't want to do that, right? So while I was constantly trying to head, even as a little kid, I didn't really like Jack Kirby and stuff because he was unrealistic to me. You know, I'd look at the anatomy and say, like, what is this, right? That was like Neil Adams had once said, that was a bit of an education, something I had to grow in, you know, paraphrasing, had to grow into to appreciate. But as I was heading towards more realistic images, right, as the years were going by, I kept thinking that it was all supposed to just come to. So when I talk about these things about how if you just keep doing the same thing and expecting that you're going to get better, you're wasting your time, it's because I know I've spent time doing that. But referencing is important, and you got to look at things how they actually are to know how to draw them. What do you think? It's just going to come out of your head if you don't know how things actually look? That's absurd. But a lot of people don't know that. And in the communities today, especially when it comes to comic book work, I'm noticing, like, I'm just putting my foot back. This has always been a kind of craft and passion that I've always kind of like returned to after some time has gone by. Sometimes it's the oil painting, sometimes it's this, right? But I'm noticing that there's just a lot of envy and hate, and not just online, like the big wigs, I don't know, who are getting the hits or whatever on YouTube or whatever, but even locally in your own communities, you got fucking these witchy, I don't know, cunts just watching what other people are doing and trying to figure. It's like, fuck off. You know, you're either good or you're not, or you're learning to be good. But going around putting each other down and tearing each other up, it's not going to help you with your art. You suck shit, or you said something that was inappropriate concerning someone that was on the climb, that was trying to make it. Someone actually died last year based on that kind of bullshit. And I was furious about it. What a loss. But there are people out there that still don't listen to such things. I don't want to get on that rant yet. I'm saving it. You know, April's rolling around. I'll put it that way. And it's just unbelievable how shitty some of these communities are at processing information. They don't think. They feel things emotionally and just run with the pack. They don't think. You know, they think they're thinking. I don't want to get into it. But anyway, you're going to get that, you know? But you're going to get that from people who are even looking at some of the absolute greats in the field that they envy and that they wish they could draw like and etc. And they wish they could paint like and they wish they were as good, but they want to tear them through the mud and just because they're losers. Or they're simply just not on the path to producing the kind of work that they would like to be able to say, I'm getting good, I'm learning, I'm getting better, I'm possibly going to do this to make a living or whatever. They don't process information. Everything is instantaneous. They'll look at something and make assumptions. Everyone's like, you know, right? It's like, how do I put it? People, if I'm going to rob a bank, I'll be wearing a mask. You know what I mean? Right? You know? I'm not going to go into public and fucking do stuff like this to say, hey, look, I'm ripping shit off. You know what I mean? So they don't know what they're talking about. They don't reference their material. And you look at their work, and it shows. You're like, fuck, you don't know what you're doing. Why don't you learn how to draw these things before you start? Anyway. Different topic altogether. But yeah, the thing about referencing. Yeah, if you find those references that inspire you, and they tend to be smaller in your reference material, go ahead, blow them up. Blow them up and get a better look at them. Because they're shrunken down as it is. But if you get them blown up, you can really get a feel for the artist's hand, whether it would be their inking or their penciling technique. And it's a good thing. Referencing is a good thing. And especially for some of you who look at your work and you say, it just doesn't look real. Why does his look real but mine doesn't? It's because you haven't studied. You're not studying things as they are. You know, you're not studying the figure. you know, or you're not studying your light sources, right? Or you're not studying your contrast, your forms, anything. You're not studying period. You're just fucking jerking off, thinking, oh, if I keep going, I'll get better. Sounds good, but doubtful. But anyway, go ahead and use your references. Do what you do. Personally, I've got nothing to fucking prove. I got nothing to prove. I know what I can do. I know what I'm capable of. I've been doing it for a long, long time. And I continue to improve because I think I've got the right attitude. I'll put it this way. I was the kind of guy that would go into a comic book convention and ask the pros, slap my work on the table and say, okay, do me a favor. As you look at my work, I know it's pretty good, but tell me what I'm doing wrong. I'm telling you, folks, that's how I went about it. Because if you just want those pats on the back from Aunt Sally and stuff, you know, she's not going to tell you what's wrong with your work, right? And there's things I've said in the past. Like, you know, but other artists can do it. But the ones that I said that to, they'd look at me first and they think, well, I don't want to, you know, offend, right? But I said, no, go ahead. And I learned so much that way. They'd look at a drawing and say, oh, you start with the head first before you do the figure, right? And I said, you can tell that? He goes, yeah, I can tell that. Never do that. Do your full figure, but, you know, things like that. Oh, there's a whole, you know, in a few minutes, learn so much about your work and go home and then work on it. And, you know, just, you know, look at the weaker stuff. And if you look at your work and you know there's something wrong, there's something I'm going to tell you right off the bat. Don't ever look at it and say, oh, well, I see there's something wrong, but maybe people won't notice. Buddy, if you notice, they're sure as fuck going to notice, okay? And you go back and you fix it until you get it right. That's it. That's the whole thing right there. Kirby even said that. He believed everyone could draw. Was Kirby a natural talent? In many ways, yes. But artistically, I don't think he really was when it came to anatomy and realism and that stuff. He'd say he was a cartoonist, but he had a gift that was different from other people. But he said you could do it. You just go back and you tweak it and you fix it until it's right. Well, I would like to add to that and say that if you're going for realism and you tweak it and you just can't get it, there's a reason why you can't get it. It's because you don't know what that thing you're trying to draw looks like. So you go back and spend some time looking at images, references, photos, the real thing, whatever, until you get a feel for what, and then go back and look at your work. And I promise you, like that, you'll realize where you were going wrong. You know? I don't know. I hope this helps somebody, but I just wanted to explain to something. You know, there's going to be a lot of people that are just out there they don't like what you say about something. Could be politically or could be something socially, or, you know, they disagree with something. They'll use something that's completely irrelevant to the discussion to describe, you know, who you are. You could be having a conversation about politics, and the next thing, or you know, whatever the topic is. And the next thing you know, they're talking about what kind of shoes you wear. Those types of people, right? Or you know, the whiskers on your face, or what kind of music you listen to, or something stupid like that that has nothing to do with the actual discussion. It's this identity reasoning. It's emotional, it's stupid, and more people are falling are being subjected to it. You know, I'm sorry. A lot of these nitwits are coming from their artistic communities, and they'll go on about their social concerns or political concerns with their work. And it's like, yeah, I don't care what your fucking concerns are politically or socially. Your work sucks shit. And your whole fucking channel is about selling your personality, because you certainly aren't selling art. It's garbage. And we're getting to a point where there's multitudes of people who don't know the fucking difference. And I say that's fine. Don't get me wrong. It's just that I think a lot of people are fooling themselves out of their own education in learning how to do this shit. But I got nothing to prove. And I'm just going to put the shit up there. They can whine, they can squirm, they can bitch, they can complain, they can do whatever the fuck they want. But they'll never do what I'm doing. Read me?